Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how many of you have ever heard of an actor by the name of Tyrone Power? Can I see your hands, please? In my family, the oldest female gets to name the child in each set. What that means was my grandmother could name the first one of each one of her kids. She was going to name her first grandson after her favorite actor, who was Clark Gable. Anybody ever hear of Clark Gable? My mother said, no way. I'm not going to name this kid after that. I'm not following. I'm going to name him after my favorite actor, who was Sidney Poitier. Big debate. Finally, my father said, look, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn that television on, and whatever actor comes on, that's what we're naming this kid. And she turned the television on, and there was Tyrone Power. And that's how I became Tyrone. My father told me later, he said, son, you're lucky. He said, son, you're lucky, because had it been up to me, I would have named you after my favorite actor, who was Gabby Hayes at that time. Now, I don't tell that story much anymore. Let me tell you what. One of my favorite judges, Judge Crocker, said, Tyrone, don't tell that story. Jurors don't know Gabby Hayes anymore. She's right. I was telling that story once. Young man raised his hand and said, Mr. Moncrief, I don't get it. Who's this Gabby Hayes guy? I said, son, that's all right. The next time you see an old Roy Rogers movie, well, Gabby Hayes is the funny-looking guy who rides with Roy Rogers. He looked at me for a moment. Who's Roy Rogers? I began to realize, folks, that my era was slowly passing away. But there's something about that era I hope never passes away. For example, there's some guys here, I'm looking at your ages, who are from that era. We couldn't wear earrings, could we, guys? We had to say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And if we were sitting on a bus and a lady was standing up, we had to give that lady that seat. That's the era I'm from, folks. Look, I know you're a little uncomfortable. You know, we got a judge here, we got prosecutors on the other side, lawyers on both sides. I know you're kind of uncomfortable, but I want you to relax a moment. I have decided to pick one of you to come up with me for a second and just stand up here. You don't have to say a word. I just want you to stand right here, okay? And this is the person, there's 12 of you. This is the person I'm going to ask to come up. I want to be sure I pronounce your name correctly. And the person I will ask will be this person. I'm not going to ask anybody. I just wanted you to get that fear in your gut just a few seconds. Now, how many of you were nervous? Can I see your hand? Be honest with me. See, look, I try cases all the time. I've tried cases from traffic tickets to capital murder where they were seeking death penalty. But every time they bring that jury in that hallway, I feel that fear too. But I always make it through. So those of you who are nervous, you'll make it through also. How many of you, who has a large backyard? Which one of you jurors? Can I see your hand? Large backyard. What's your name, ma'am? Miss Krista?
Yes.
Metz? That
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Now, we're going to act. Let's forget about this courtroom. Let's forget about the judge and how structured and how tight it is. Let's act as though we're in Miss Metz's backyard. All right? Let's forget about being in the courtroom. Let's get away from the stress of it. And let's say we're at this party. All of us. I mean, this group too. And let's say you know that I'm a criminal defense lawyer. There is one question that every criminal defense lawyer will answer, because a criminal defense lawyer will always be asked this question. You know what it is. What is it? What question do you want to ask me, a criminal defense lawyer? What is it? You know it. What is it? Yes, ma'am.
Can you get me off?
No. There's another one. No. This is a question I want you to think about. There's a question that is always asked every criminal defense lawyer.
Can you represent me?
No, there's another one. The real one is this. What is it? Somebody knows it. That's it. Say it.
How can you limit yourself?
All right. Because of what?
Because you let, the stereotype is you let criminals go free.
Absolutely. That's the question. How do you represent guilty people? Isn't that the right question? Am I right? Isn't that what all you're thinking? Let me tell you this, and I'll give this answer to every group. It is not the guilty people that frightens us. It's representing innocent people that frightens us. Okay? That's what's real scary. All right? All right. Let me tell you a story. When I was in law school, I know we have no lawyers on the panel here, but when I was in law school, anybody who went to law school will tell you that is a tremendously difficult task. And let me ask the guys this question. Do you remember the very first car you had? Guys, remember the very first? I remember mine, 1969 Malibu. Beautiful, loved it. When I was in law school, I studying late one night in the library. I go to the library, get my books, I come back to my car. Then I forgot something. Go back to the library, come back, that car gone. Never saw it again. All my work and everything gone. You can imagine how I felt, right? What if I was sitting on the jury like you are, and a young man was charged with stealing a car? How many of you think I would be the best type of juror for that type of case? Can I see your hands? How many of you think I would not be the good type of juror for that case? Can I see? Can anybody tell me why? Anybody? Why would I not be a good juror for that type of case? Anybody?
Because you've been a victim. You've experienced it.
But I'm a lawyer. Can't I overlook it? Can't, if the judge instructs me to overlook that and put that aside, can't I overdo that? What do you think?
Not necessarily.
Tell me about that. That's Ms. Thompson?
It's Johnson.
I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, I'm right. Tell me why. Why, Ms. Johnson? Why couldn't I overlook that?
Our experiences tend to stay with us.
All right.
So
Anybody else agree with her?
even though the judge may instruct you to put it aside, doesn't necessarily mean that you will.
All right. There are some things because of your own personal experiences you can't put aside. Am I correct, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you. A gentleman sitting next to you, that Mr. Evans?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Tell me about this, sir. What were you thinking?
I was thinking about the 69 Malibu.
We'll talk about that afterwards. But what? Tell me about it. Could I put that aside? The judge has instructed me to put it aside. Why can't I just put it aside?
It was your first car. You know.
The emotional attachment
Yes, sir.
is some things. Can you look, folks? You heard the judge say that we have a right, an absolute right to participate in jury duty. Let me tell you something else. We also have a right not to participate. That's a duty not to participate. You folks agree with me with that? See, let me tell you what. It wouldn't be, if the case was guilty all the way, innocent all the way, that would be easy. The reason I wouldn't participate, because what if it was close? And I wouldn't be sure if I make a decision based upon something that happened in my past. With me? Does that make sense, folks? All right, okay. Now, I know that some of you are related to police officers. Can I see your hands? Those, I think that's juror Ms. Gilmore. and think that's Mr. Roper?
Well, he's a family friend. He's a friend of my grandparents.
Okay, Mr. Roper. Who else is that? Mr. Hart? Okay. Now you have what is, Ms. Gilmore, tell me, what's that relationship, ma'am?
I have a brother-in-law that was DPS, but he's retired, and a nephew that's a detective.
You pretty close to him?
They live in another city.
All right. You ever talk to them about their work, their job?
No,
All right.
no
Okay.
work related. No.
Mr. Roper, what about you? You ever?
Well, no. Well, he's the U.S. Marshal. That my grandparents are neighbors. I mean, they go over there and eat dinner and stuff occasionally.
All right. Okay.
I don't know him very well though.
All right. No close relationship?
No, I mean I've never even talked to him about work or anything.
All right. Mr. Hawk, tell me about it. Now, I know your son, Mr. Hawk, your son is a police officer?
Yes,
And what type of work does he do, sir?
he's in dignitary protection.
All right. Now, I'm sure when you see him, think about other police officers, right? Or you see other
Correct.
police officers, you think about your son.
Yes,
You can see the bond that's established merely by you seeing a police officer, right?
correct.
Now, if a police officer were to come and testify, is it, in my understanding, you may have a bond merely because of the relationship between your son with that officer before he testified?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, all right. Anything about the relationship with police officers that would make you automatically believe a police officer as opposed to anyone else?
No,
All right. Anybody here was prosecutor one time in your life? Wanted to be a prosecutor? All right. Anybody here was ever been on a grand jury before? Prior criminal jury experience. Anybody ever have that? All right. Now, when the judge read the indictment, you know what I watched? Look, folks, let me tell you something. Lawyers are not the smartest people in the world, but we do observe. When the judge read the indictment, and you heard that this was a murder case, I saw some of you lean back. I saw some of you feel uncomfortable, merely because it was a murder case. Anybody tell me, now Mr. Evans, how did you feel when you heard that this was a murder case, sir?
Just that I wouldn't want to be the one to, wrongly convict somebody or something.
All right. Anybody else? When you heard it was a murder case, did you start to look at my client, Mr. Schuler, and say, wow, does he look like a murderer? Anybody felt that way? He looks like, does he fit the category of person that I thought was a murderer? Anybody feel that way? All right. Merely because the indictment was murder. Anybody feel uncomfortable or leaning one way or another merely because of the indictment of murder? All right. How many of you have ever had a traffic ticket? How many of you have never had a traffic ticket? All right. If you've never had a traffic ticket, keep your hands up. The police will be taking your names down in just a few moments. Now, those who had a traffic ticket, let me see your hands again. How many of you were guilty? The police said you did something, and you know you did it. How many of you were innocent? Police said you did something, and you know you didn't do it. Okay, that's Miss Gilmore. Tell me about it. What did the police say you did and you know you didn't do?
Well, I've had a traffic ticket that I was guilty, but I've had a traffic ticket that I was not guilty.
All right,
so.
tell me about the one where you were not guilty.
I was stopped. I went through a school zone at the 20-mile speed limit. When I got out of the school zone, I went up to 40, and then I got stopped.
Did the police give you a ticket?
Gave me a ticket for going 40 through a school zone.
Did you challenge that ticket, ma'am? Go to trial, fight it?
No, I went to court, and they couldn't find the ticket, so I had to come back another time. They still couldn't find the ticket, so they told me come back another time, and they still couldn't find the ticket. They told me if one more time they couldn't find the ticket, that they would dismiss it. And then the day before I was supposed to go, they called me and told me they found the ticket. So,
All right. Okay. All right, Ms. Gilmore. Okay. Who else? Yes, sir. Is that Mrs. Curry? Tell me about it, sir. What did the police say that you did in this traffic ticket, and you know you didn't?
They said that I had failed to register the vehicle in Texas, which actually I did, but I didn't get the sticker in time.
All right.
And
Did you challenge it? They gave you a ticket for it.
Yeah, I challenged it.
Did you challenge it? Go to trial and challenge it?
Yes, and it got dismissed.
All right. You had a right to fight it. You know that even traffic tickets, you have a right to fight them. You have a right to have a jury, just like we have here. Anybody know that? Look, folks, let me tell you something. To get you to court, they have to have a piece of paper. If it's a municipal court, that piece of paper is called a traffic ticket. If you stop for a DWI, that piece of paper is called an information. If you're in a felony court like we are now, that piece of paper is called an indictment. That makes sense? So indictment is really similar to a traffic ticket. A lot of you didn't know that, did you? But that's what it is. Mr. Schuler said on his traffic ticket, like you, Ms. Gilmore, that he's going to challenge it. You have any objection to him challenging his? Ms. Curry, what about you? You have any objection to him challenging it? All right. Now, look. I'm going to do something you think is going to be odd. And I do this with every juror panel. How many of you think you're conditioned by television? You're conditioned by television.
I don't even watch it.
He doesn't watch it. Some people don't believe it. I'm a lawyer. I don't say nothing if I can't prove it. Watch this. There was a cigarette commercial a long time ago. And it started off something like this. Somebody finish it for me. I will walk a mile for a Winston, tastes good, like. See that? Now I know your ages just by you telling me that. Let me tell you why. You haven't heard that commercial in 42 years. 42. So I know your ages. So if you're under 42, you don't know what we're talking about. 42 years, but we'll always say, I'll walk a mile counting. Here's the one that gets me. Here's the one that gets me, and my teachers would get upset with me with this one. How do you spell relief? I spell it just like you do, R-O-L-A-I-D-S. Conditioned by television, we are. And let me tell you something. The reason I bring that out, if you have an emotional event that happens in your life, it is very similar to the television commercial. You can never forget it. It will always be with you. I can never ask you not to think of that commercial. It would be unfair for me to tell you to put it on the side. Now I want to go to my next topic, is which victims of crime, violent crime. Anybody have a family member or yourself who's been a victim of a crime? Anybody? Friend, family member? Mr. Evans, tell me about that, sir.
Yes, I had a friend of mine, I guess, that was hit from behind and stole, I think, his necklace and some other things. And
All right,
he had to have surgery and everything.
all right. Anybody have a family member who was shot, who was cut in a conflict or anything? Anybody like that? Anything about, okay, all right. Self-defense, you know, the judge mentioned it, prosecutor mentioned it slightly, and I want to talk about some aspects of it. How many of you have ever in your lives been afraid, so afraid that you thought you were going to die? Now see, that's sort of unfair, because that's not something we ordinarily go through in our lives. So afraid that you thought you were going to die. Somebody raise their hand up there.
I did.
Tell me about it, Bim. Tell me about that incident.
Well, I had something called pericarditis,
Uh-huh.
and it's inflammation of the lining of the heart. And I was in intensive care, and I thought I was going to die.
How many of you have ever had an incident where you're so afraid that thought you were going to die by the hands of another person? See? This is not something that we go through every day, folks. This is not an event that happens to us every day. How many of you, being a criminal defense lawyer, and most criminal defense lawyers who do cases, murder cases and capital murder cases, have met people who are not like you? We have met people who, if they said they're going to kill you, they're going to kill you. How many of you ever met a person that you were so afraid of, they threatened you to kill you, that you believe they would kill you? Anybody meet a person like that? See? Anybody? See, we're going to take you to a place you haven't been. And you're going to have to make a decision on an event that you never experienced before. Ms. Gilmore, I'm going to start with you. Juror number 1. If a family member of yours or you yourself was in a position where you were threatened and you thought you were going to die, or you thought a friend of yours was going to die, would you use whatever you could to defend that person?
Yes,
Why? Why would you do that? Tell me why.
to protect myself and the other party.
Mr. Roper, tell me about it. What do you think? Tell me why.
Well, I don't want to die. That's why I would use whatever force was necessary.
All right. Mr. Wynn, tell me about it, sir.
I think I would as well. It's just natural instinct.
Right. But now the prosecutors may say, well, you should have waited, you should have thought about it, you should have been careful, you should have analyzed it. Why wouldn't you, would you respond right then, or would you?
It's a natural reaction, I think.
Instinct,
Right.
self-survival. That correct, sir?
Correct.
Mr. Mercado, tell me about that, sir. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Mercado.
Mercado, okay, sir. Tell me, you ever been in a position where you had to defend someone else or defend yourself?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, one time, me and a friend were at a club,
Uh-huh.
and he had other friends of his that didn't like him anymore because they had bad blood, I guess, and I had to help him get away from them.
Tell me about that. What was it like in that moment when you had to help that friend? What was it like?
It was scary, but it was something we had to do because when I stood up for them, I said, "Get away from him and stop doing that." They were after me, so I had to protect myself too.
What did you do?
I used I pushed a couple of them. I had to hit a few people because they wouldn't. I said, stay back, so I had to hit them a couple times.
All right, okay. When you hit him a couple of times, were you thinking logically or were you just acting instinctively?
Both, I guess.
All right.
I didn't want to hurt. I know I didn't want to hurt him too bad, just enough so he'd stay away.
All right, okay. Anybody disagree with Mr. Mercado's actions? Anybody say, you shouldn't have done that. Maybe you should have hesitated a little bit. Anybody? All right. Tell me, Mr. Hawk, what would you, in a position, you ever been in a position where you had to defend someone else or defend yourself?
No, not really.
All right. Have you ever heard of police officers being in a position where they think a person has a weapon, person is reaching in their pocket, and really all they had was a cell phone? Police shot them anyway? Anybody hear about situations like that?
I have heard of that. I was not there.
Right. Did that make sense for you, that a police should do that? Should a police be allowed, even if a person doesn't actually have a weapon, to pull out to defend himself? You think that makes sense to you?
Not until you see the weapon.
All right. Now, good point. Mr. Hawk says, not until you see the weapon. Anybody disagree or agree with that position? Mr. Roper, tell me about it, sir. You said.
Well, it depends. I mean, if you see something in their pocket, like the outline of a pistol or something, and they're reaching in there pulling it out and saying that they have a weapon.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the police officer has to defend himself. I mean, he has
Right.
the right to defend himself too.
Right.
I mean, that's a little bit different than if they're just reaching in there and just digging around, you know.
All right. Okay.
that.
Anybody else agree with Mr. Hawk, who says not until they see the weapon? Anybody agree with that position? Mr. Curry, what do you think? Tell me about it. Tell me. Why do you agree with that, sir?
Unfortunately, law enforcement agents are put in a difficult position because they have to.
Speak a little loud, sir. I'm sorry.
They're put in a difficult position because you can't really run around gunslinging and shooting innocent people if they're not armed.
Right. Okay.
But
All right.
if they are armed in the event, then obviously they have to use lethal force. To
All right. Let's take it back to what Mr. Hawk said. Gets into a conflict with a person who's maybe threatened you, Mr. Curry. He's reaching for something. You don't know what he's reaching for. You have your weapon on you. Do you think you have to wait till he pulls that weapon all the way out before you respond? Or do you think just because of the fear, the apprehension, the thought process you had about him before, you should be able to defend yourself instantly?
I would have shot him in the leg by then.
I'm sorry?
I would have shot him in the leg by then.
All right.
If I felt threatened and he was
Okay,
at me.
good. Now, he brought up a good point. Mr. Curry said I would shot him in the leg. Mr. Mercado said, I'm not thinking in that instant. You think you have to be thinking, sir, to defend yourself? Or would you just instinctively fire?
Things happen so fast, you don't really have a
Exactly.
time to react.
This event is not happening like we're talking like now, is it?
Yeah.
We're having, now see what I'm saying? Mr. Evans, you with me? We're talking casually like this is happening, but this is happening, boom, boom, boom. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, and this person who you're afraid of is attempting to go for something you don't know what it is. In an instant, 2, 3, you have to make a determination whether you live or die. What do you do?
Same reaction. I would have been shooting him in the leg, or in the bottom section, I wouldn't have been aiming for the head.
All right. Okay. Anybody else agree or disagree with Mr. King? Yes, ma'am. Tell me about that.
I don't agree with him.
Tell me about it.
I have 2 children, and if I thought somebody was going to do something to me, I would have my gun out already shooting them. I mean, I would want to defend myself. I wouldn't even wait till they
You wouldn't
found out
wait.
anything. No.
All right. Who disagrees with her? Disagrees. I'm sorry. You shouldn't wait. You should think about it. All right. Okay. Anybody else? Position about defend. The law says you don't have to wait. It's just like you said, ma'am, that if I'm afraid, if I'm defending myself or my child in such a fear that at that moment, I don't have to wait if I think this person is putting a threat to my life. Does that make sense? Anybody disagree with that law? All right. Okay. Cross-examination. How many of you folks watch lawyer shows? Could you tell me some of the shows that you watch? What are some of the names? Give me some names right quick. CSI. Oh, boy, we always get a CSI. What's another one? Okay, I'm going to come back to Perry Mason. I'm going to come back to Perry Mason. What's another one? Law and Order, what's another one?
NCIS.
NCIS. How many of you believe that stuff really happens in courtrooms? How many of you really believe that? Who said that? Ms. Johnson? Tell me about it. Why do you think that
I
really
believe
happens?
some of it happened.
Like what?
It seems like a lot of the stories are closely related to a lot of the things you see in the news.
All right. If you ask any of real lawyer, they'll tell you they don't like those shows. And we don't look at them. You know why? Because it's not real. Who said Perry Mason? Did you say Perry Mason, Mr. Evans? Look, sir, I went to law school because of Perry Mason. Let me explain to you. You know what Perry did, right? Mr. Evans, you know. You watch Perry Mason. Anybody ever who does not watch Perry Mason? You never heard of Perry Mason? Oh, boy, I'm getting too old. Okay. All right, he watched it last night. All right, my era is passing around, folks. Perry Mason, folks. I went to law school because of Perry Mason. You know what Perry would do in court? A witness would get on the stand and Perry would ask questions over and over and over and over. And finally, the witness would say, Mr. Mason, it wasn't your client. I did the murder. Right? Perry's so good, folks. People out of the audience would say, and I did the murder too, Mr. Perry. That's not the way it happens in the real world, folks. It's not the way it's going to happen in this trial. I've tried a lot. I've never had it to happen. Let me tell you what it's like in a real trial. Car A hits car B. The witness says, I saw car A hit car B. The police gets there, I saw car A, it's car B. Prosecutor talks to him, I saw car A, hit car B. You with me, Mr. Curry? Gets in court. Prosecutor said, what did you see? I saw car A, hit car B. The judge said, Mr. Moncrief, it's time for you to ask questions. It wouldn't be very intelligent, Mr. Evans, for me to ask the question, what did you see? So my questions would be like this. Mr. Witness, did you see the lady who was on the other side of the street? Yes, sir. Oh, what'd she have on? Red dress? Anything in her hand? Yes, sir. Well, what did she have in her hand? Black purse? Was she attractive? Yes, sir. What took your attention away from her? Well, I heard a crash. What took your attention away from her? I heard a crash. No further questions. Some of you know. Why? I said no further questions. Can anybody tell me why? Yes, sir, Mr. Lowe.
Well, because he didn't actually see the crash. He just said he heard the crash. So I guess you'd want to cut him off right there so he couldn't give any more, I don't know, details or whatever.
He never will say he didn't see the crash. Am I correct?
Yeah, yes.
No matter what the evidence says, he never will say, I never saw it.
But he did when he said he heard a crash.
Exactly. But he never saw it, really, right? Now, here's the reason I asked that question. When the state is putting on their case, and they put it on direct examination, could you wait for me to do cross-examination? Can I see the hands on the front row? Those of you who will wait until, for me to ask questions before you make a decision. Can I get your commitment on that? All right? On the second row, can I get your commitment on? All right. Thank you. I'm going to go down the row now and ask a question to each of you. Let me tell you what's going to happen. After you're chosen, you're going to go in the back. And there's 12 jurors. You're going to pick one person who will be the foreperson. One of you. And I'm going to ask each of you, what type of foreperson would you be? There are two types. Type A is the type of foreperson that I have made a decision, I want everybody to think like me. Type B is the type of person, I made a decision, but I'm going to respect you if you disagree. You with me? You may disagree with me, that's all right. Now, Ms. Gilmore, juror number one, what type of foreperson would you be? A or B? B. Okay. Why would you be B, Ms. Gilmore?
Because not everyone would probably think like I do. I mean, everyone has their own decisions, and they have to make their own decisions, and you have to respect that decision. So.
All right. Would you respect someone who disagreed with you? Let's say if Mr. Roper disagreed with you, you saw it one way, he saw it a different way. Would you respect his right to have a disagreement with you?
Certainly.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Roper, tell me, what type of juror would you be? I mean, foreperson.
Probably
A or B?
B, because, I mean, if I came to a decision, I could be wrong. I mean, that is possible.
All right.
And, I mean, better to leave it open for discussion.
All right. Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Wynn, tell me about it. What type of juror, foreperson would you be if you were in the back?
Initially, it'd be B, but then at a certain point, you'd have to transition to an A.
Tell me about that. When you transition to an A, meaning what? You want everybody to agree with you?
Yes. Well, I would want everyone to come to one conclusion.
What if you couldn't reach a conclusion?
Then we would continue to debate it.
All right. Would you get to the point where you'd have courage enough to tell the judge, Judge, we can't reach a decision. I don't want to force someone else to go along with my position.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Next juror. Yes, sir. Type of juror, foreperson would you be? A or B?
B.
Tell me why.
Everybody has the right to have their own opinion, I guess.
All right. What if people disagree with you?
I wouldn't like it, but I wouldn't hold it against them.
All right. Mr. Hawk, tell me about it. What type of juror, foreperson would you be if you're in the back?
It'd be a B.
All right. Explain why.
I think everybody's entitled to their own opinion.
All right. You wouldn't force your opinion on someone else?
No. If they disagreed with me, I would find out why there is a disagreement.
All right. Would you have courage enough to go tell the judge, Judge, we cannot make a decision on this case?
After a long deliberation, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You haven't said much. You may make this panel. You need to talk. Tell me, tell me about it, Ms. Gonzalez. What type of foreperson would you be if you were in the back?
B, but the same thing. At the end of the day, I'll probably have to change to A because I want everybody to make a final decision.
What if they could not make a decision?
Keep deliberating until we got to the decision. Try to keep showing why I think my decision.
All right. Mr. Curry, tell me about your search. You're in the back.
I'd be a B as well.
Tell me why.
Because everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes, ma'am. That's Miss Henderson?
Yes.
All right. Just tell me about it. What type of foreperson would you be?
I'd be a B
All right. Why, Miss Henderson?
because I have my own opinion, and if someone doesn't agree with it, they just don't. And if we were to come to a conclusion, just because we came to a conclusion, that doesn't mean that I have to change my opinion about what I think.
All right, Ms. Henderson, let me ask you a question, ma'am. You brought up a good point. You're a juror who, say you agree with the defense perspective, but there are 11 other jurors here who disagree with you. What do? Do you go along with them, change your position to be sure everybody's united, or do you stick with your opinion? What type of juror would you be?
I would have to hear what everyone has to say first, and then if it matches up with what I say, then I'm going to stick with what I say. And if they don't like it, they just don't like it.
All right. You willing to stand up to them?
Yes.
All right. Now, you know the judge back here, if it got to the point, we can go to the judge and knock on the door and say, we disagree. They can't force you. You willing to stick with your opinion?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Next juror. Yes, ma'am. Tell me about it. What type of foreperson would you be? What type of juror would you be if you're in the back?
I'd be a B.
Explain it.
Definitely because I have my own opinions. I'd be willing to listen to everybody else, but if I didn't agree, I would be willing to go to the judge and certainly say I don't agree. And I'm not changing my mind. I've listened to everybody's opinion, and I'm stuck with mine.
Okay. Mr. Evans, tell me about it. What type of juror would you be in the back?
A B.
All right. Explain that to me, sir.
You know, maybe you missed something there. It's always good to talk to other people and see what maybe they caught something that I missed.
All right. Okay. All right. Ms. Johnson, tell me about it. What type of juror, foreperson would you be?
I'd be a B.
All right. Explain it to me why.
Well, I consider myself to be a fair and open-minded person, and I think it's wrong to expect everyone to go along with your beliefs just because that's what you believe.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. The final juror.
I'd be a B.
Explain to me why.
Same thing with everybody else. Y'all have to, like he said, I may have missed something, and they're going to have to convince me to change.
Thank you. Now look, we're going to go through what they call deselection process now.